personally, and I honestly do speak as a Black woman, it is very hard to separate, these political ideals away from sport, because I think everything we do as a minority is inherently politicized when you are a minority in a space. So any interaction that we have with the sports and things become politicized in their very nature, just because we are, subconsciously excluded from spaces and all these kind of things. So anybody who does use their platform to shed a light on that, for me, it's worth applaud. Like it's worth doing. But that's my personal opinion.
But also, that being said, I don't know what level Latifi is even on, because he's never done.
Damn, that is a burn and a half.
Is it? Is that really?
He doesn't even have a level, like.
He doesn't, like.
But the contract extension probably has the written in invisible ink, permanent number 2. What I'm seeing is that the Aston is very difficult to handle around the slow speed corners. Like, you can't go into a corner with any kind of speed. You have to really slow it down in order to get enough traction and turn the car. Luckily, like, he managed to do like a little U-ey in the side bit, which I think he's getting pretty good at those. Like, I've seen him do that quite a few times. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but
hello, everyone, and welcome back to On the Chicane. You're here with me, Marium, and my co-host, Paris. And we're back for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I'm back. I wasn't here last week. Tandy from Stock F1 filled in for me, and it was a great video. So if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. But I'm back this time, and back for a chaotic race. But Baku's always chaotic. Just your standard narrow street circuit that no one knows how to navigate, even though you've been racing here since 2016, I think.
All of those slow corners, right? Like,
around.
It's hard.
So much chaos on this track. Lots of safety cars and red flags and yellow flags and all sorts going on this weekend in F1 and F2. I don't know if any of you caught F2, but both the sprint and the actual race were pretty much behind the safety car the entire time because people just kept crashing. And as expected, there was also a safety car in today's F1 race. I suppose let's just crack on with what's been going on this week. The main thing that we wanted to start off with is the controversial comments brought to us by none other than the president of the FIA, Ben Sulayem. He's been saying some things and people aren't happy, but he's been saying things since he was given the post of president, and I'm just questioning his legitimacy, I think.
Yeah, I think what's happened is he did an interview with Grand Prix 24/7 just after the Monaco Grand Prix. People are arguing that perhaps the translation, I'm guessing it was translated from French, the translation may have been bad, but essentially one of the questions that he was asked was, do you think that motorsport has a tendency to be too political? And his response was, yes, you've got basically drivers like Lauda and Alain Prost, and they only cared about driving. Now Vettel drives a rainbow bicycle. Lewis is passionate about human rights, and Norris talks about mental health. Everybody has a right to think. To me, it's just about deciding whether or not we impose our beliefs in something over the sport all the time. So what he was implying there is that there is a way to separate these beliefs from the sport, and by sharing your beliefs, you're imposing them on the sport and on the fans. As we said, maybe the translation was slightly off, and that was not exactly what he was trying to say. He did go on Twitter afterwards to try and brush things over a little bit, because obviously those comments are very controversial, I think, what he said. So his response on Twitter from his own hands, his own mouth in English was, as a driver, I've always believed in a sport as a catalyst. I've always believed in sport as a catalyst of progress in society. That is why promoting sustainability, diversity, and inclusion is a key priority of my mandate. In the same way, I value the commitment of all drivers and champions for a better future. So as you can see, they are two quite contradictory statements between what he is supposed to have said and what he is saying himself. However, I think taking it back away from him and not necessarily focusing specifically on him as a person, in general, there is this idea that, you know, F1 as a sport can be separated from things that are political. Personally, and I honestly do speak as a Black woman, it is very hard to separate these political ideals away from sport, because I think everything we do as a minority is inherently politicized when you're a minority in a space. So any interaction that we have with the sports and things become politicized in their very nature, just because we are, you know, subconsciously excluded from spaces and all these kind of things. So anybody who does use their platform to shed a light on that, for me, it's, you know, worth applaud, like it's worth doing. But that's my personal opinion.
I think I agree with you. These athletes, these drivers are public figures who, I mean, if they don't want to say anything, they're criticized. If they do say something, they're criticized. You know, they can't win. So if they are going to speak out, and they're going to speak out against things that they personally think are a problem, for example, Seb and his sustainability, he's only trying to shed a light on a problem, right? You can't blame him for that. And by saying that there's no space for politics in sport, I don't know how much of that I agree with, because this sport is made up of these people, and you can't stop them from having their own voice and having their own beliefs. And if they're going to have like 50 cameras on them over the weekend, and they know that they can do something by like wearing a t-shirt that's saying, you know, stop killing fish, like obviously they're going to try and like push that message across. And I think as long as they're not saying anything that is detrimental or like gonna, you know, target a specific group of people in a negative way, I don't see what the problem is.
And when you have that kind of a platform and you have those cameras looking at you, isn't it almost as well a bit of a duty to raise awareness of things that might not otherwise get?
Yeah, because really, if they don't do it, who else is going to do it? Exactly. They have a fan base for a reason, right? You don't look at people like, I don't know, some politician over in Aylesbury. You're not going to be looking at that person to see what their thoughts are, because they don't have a platform where they have a large fan base. But if you do have a large fan base, like people are going to look to that person just to see what their thoughts are on things going on in the world. It just, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me to say like sports shouldn't be politicized. It just takes me back to the whole Copernic thing with the whole taking a knee, brings that back. And I just think there is a reason that these people are doing these things, and we should be listening to them. And yeah, I think the tweets that came out from Sulayem, it sounds like it just came from the like press release, to be honest. Yeah. So I don't know how much of that was genuine. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to say that sports shouldn't be politicized, because they are political.
Yeah. And I think what's last point really, but what's also worth mentioning is that, you know, so in that interview, he talks about his rallying career. He talks about, you know, how he's got to the position he's in. And he comes from a privileged background. He does not come from a non-privileged background. And it's worth understanding that people from privileged backgrounds, even if they are a minority in a particular sector, I mean, obviously he's from the Middle East, so he's not a minority there, but when you put him into the world of Formula One, he becomes a minority. That doesn't necessarily mean that he views everything through the same lens as some of the other minorities and marginalized groups in Formula One. So I think it's important to kind of have empathy to people who have issues. And as Formula One grows as a global sport, it is no longer a sport that is concentrated to the European lens. And I think it's worth understanding how new people might interact with the sport and how they might feel as they come into the sport. And just leaving a bit of room to be open and understanding for that, and understanding that some of the drivers have taken the time to learn about these areas, and they might want to share it. There's no reason, if you disagree with their stance, there's no reason that you can't challenge them on it, and there's no reason that you have to engage with them on that particular issue. So I think it's like, just if you're not interested in it, just ignore it. That's the simple, long and short of it.
Yeah, I think it would just be tone deaf if there was no politics in this sport anyway, because you'd be like, why are you living in your own bubble? Like, there's so much going on in the world. So yeah. But anyway, moving on to race topics, which is why we're quali yesterday. Red flag, thanks to Lance Stroll in Q1. It was the only red flag of the session, which is a little bit surprising because Baku is a circuit that is very narrow, tight corners, high speeds, and I think it's always just a chaotic race. But quali yesterday, after the red flag in Q1, was pretty smooth.
Yeah, I think it was. I think more so some of the teams, they had the porpoising was back over the weekend, and they were maybe like focusing on those issues. A couple of upsets, you had the McLarens not making it into Q3. Bottas, who usually has been doing quite well since the beginning of the year, also didn't make it into Q3. So I think there was, neither Alfa Romeo did, but we wouldn't necessarily expect Joe to. But I think there were a few upsets, but at the same time, the top five maybe were what you would expect. So you had the two Red Bulls and you had the two Ferraris in the top five, and then you had George Russell rounding it out. So Leclerc came on pole, Perez put it in front of Verstappen again, and Sainz kind of followed that up. And then you had Russell, you had Gasly behind, and then you had Lewis Hamilton top seven. So, I mean, I think other than that, it was pretty normal. And like you said, it was lucky that there weren't more safety cars and red flags and things. But yeah, it was a decent quali, I think.
Yeah, pretty standard. And then the race today.
Yeah, let's get into it. I thought it was a good race. Like I thought at first it started off a little bit slow, but a lot happened in the race. There was what did we have? We had DNFs galore. So there was a lot going on, right? And a lot of team orders and things. And I mean, we'll get into each team, but the race started off and you literally had Perez getting away like a gun over Leclerc. He literally shot off to the point where he might have damaged his tyres a little bit, and then that caused Verstappen, who had overtaken Leclerc a few laps afterwards, to kind of catch up to Perez. So that was like quite an interesting bit of the beginning. The Alpines were doing pretty well just in general. They had a lot of speed this weekend. They had a lot of straight line speed. So that was going on. And the first major thing that really happened was Sainz on lap 9, just having hydraulic issue and ending up kind of having to DNF.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Ferrari's race today.
You have to. We have a whole YouTube channel for you to talk about these things.
Yeah, fine. It's really frustrating because I feel like both Leclerc and Sainz, like they've managed to pull off a really, not a really good, but like a good quali session week in, week out. And you're like, oh yeah, Ferrari are on it. They're going to give Red Bull a challenge this weekend. And then it comes to the actual race and they like there's always an issue. Science has had zero luck like over the past God knows how many races. Like he had, I think the first two races or the first three were really good for him.
Yeah.
And it looked like the Ferrari duo were looking really strong. And then all of a sudden you see Sainz slipping away and Leclerc kind of trying to keep a hold of what he's got going on, this whole like his lead and whatever in the championship. And that even that is slowly just dwindling. I don't know what is going on with Ferrari, but yeah, they had a hydraulic issue, and then later, their the Ferrari powered cars, a few of them had issues, and there were like more DNFs. So Ferrari really need to fix up. It's the
I think then
Canadian.
you start asking yourself, is there an issue with the Ferrari engines, don't you? Like you start wondering, is it a wider issue?
Yeah, definitely. Because if all the Ferrari powered cars are DNFing, then surely it goes back to thinking about like Honda last year or the year before. Like it was always Honda powered cars that had an issue, and you were like, okay, well, obviously it's a Honda problem.
Yeah.
This seems like it's a Ferrari problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, Science first DNF, and it broke my heart a lot.
A lot happened between like after the DNF. Like you had Sebastian Vettel, who was kind of like getting up there and doing a lot of challenging driving, and at one point like he overtakes Ocon, and he kind of gets right up there, and then as soon as he does it, his car just like locks and he ends up going off into the runoff area. And I think what was really interesting about that is, he had a similar lockup yesterday in quali. Stroll had a similar lockup in quali, which caused him to go into the wall at one of the later turns. I think it was like turn 15 that Stroll went into the wall. But what I'm seeing is that the Aston is very difficult to handle around the slow speed corners. Like you can't go into a corner with any kind of speed. You have to really slow it down in order to get enough traction and turn the car. Luckily, like he managed to do like a little U-ey in the side bit, which I think he's getting pretty good at those. Like I've seen him do that quite a few times. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but so he managed to kind of like rectify it and get back onto track without DNFing. But I do think it's an issue with the Aston car. It's quite cumbersome for both drivers, and it's not helping them with their track position.
Yeah, no, definitely. Seb, I think, did an amazing job to recover that because it looked like it's a potential problem. Is Seb about to like have a DNF? But luckily he managed to recover that and bring home a very solid finish, which goes to show that the Aston Martin upgrades are obviously doing something, because I feel like his races have been getting gradually stronger. Obviously not as strong as last year when he actually managed to finish on the podium, but still it was something to come home and bring home some points. So yeah, I think you're right. There is obviously something going on with the Astons, but on the other hand, they are performing much better with this new upgrade that they
because he ended up finishing sixth, right? And I mean, if you put both Ferraris back in there, that's around eighth, which is still top 10. Like that's really a good finish. I think it's just some handling issues.
Yeah, definitely. There's obviously some little things that need to be looked at and fixed, and obviously further on in the race Stroll actually ended up DNFing, so there are issues going on. I think Aston hadn't figured out exactly what the issue was, but it's his home Grand Prix in a week. He kind of needs to fix up because I feel like Stroll's not been having much luck at all over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I think both Canadians. I mean, Latifi managed to not like DNF or come last. I know he still came last today. He managed to not DNF, and yeah, I do. Do you do you feel like Stroll and Latifi are of a similar level, or do you think one of them's better? I mean, we know which one if one of them is better, but
yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. Okay, yeah, I think one of them is better. But also, that being said, I don't know what level Latifi is even on, because he's never done.
damn, that is a burn and a half.
Is it? Is that really?
He doesn't even have a level like.
He doesn't. Like, seriously, a lot of people are like, you know what? I don't know. Latifi, I'd be surprised if he was still here next year.
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's here after the summer break. But I just think it's going to be a really like, it is a home race for them because I mean they're going to their like homeland, but I can't imagine either of them doing too well. I think for Lance Stroll, I actually do think he has some driving ability. And you know, he doesn't always come at the very, very back of the grid, and he does know how to drive a car, and he seems to like work a little bit well. Is he F1 championship material? No. Should he be on an F1 grid? Debatable. Latifi should not be on an F1 grid. Do you know what I mean? So I do think like people, because they're maybe Canadian and they both have a difficult time, I think they lump them together. But I don't think, for example, yesterday, Stroll's crash wasn't necessarily solely his fault. I think, like I said, that there was some technicalness to it, like with the car actually not being very good. Whereas I just think that Latifi is bad.
I mean, he is. Yeah. He's not great. I mean, Albon's come back in after a year of not racing in F1, and he's doing so much better than his teammate, right? They've both got the same car, so.
But yeah, so back to the race. After Seb has his little moment, what else is happening on track? You've got Perez and Max, who are about to do a little old switcheroo because Perez has like brained up his tires and Max is running faster than he is. And basically Red Bull give the team orders and say no fighting. 2 words. Not very, you know, if you heard them in a primary school, you'd be pretty happy. No fighting, you know, that's what you're not supposed to do. However, when you hear them on an F1 track, you're just like, like, can you not just let these guys, if Verstappen is so good, let him overtake Perez? He's got better tires. It's not going to be too much trouble, is it?
I mean, I get it. Like both of their drivers are at the front too, right? They don't want to lose them two in their own little battle where they either one or both of them ends up DNFing. So I get why they gave those team orders, but at the same time, like, let them race a little bit.
At least a little bit. Come on.
He's like, the thing is, and I'm probably going to get crucified for saying this, but time and time again, Max gets his wins handed to him. Leclerc today had a DNF. If it weren't for that DNF, he would have been fighting up there for the lead. He was in the lead up until his issue. Perez has shown he is an incredible driver, and if he was actually allowed to fight Max, I think he'd give him a really good running. So I just think Max is often given priority from his team.
Mm-hmm.
And Checo is obviously clearly the number 2 driver and not as important. So they often hand Max Checo's races.
Yeah.
And I mean, I won't lie, like, I saw a stat today after the race, which was ridiculous, but apparently Max has now won more races from Leclerc poles than Leclerc has won from his own poles.
Yeah,
it does break my heart as a Leclerc and a Ferrari fan. So yeah, props where it's due. Max is a good driver, I'm not denying that, but he has recently, especially in this season, had a lot of wins handed to him because of team orders and reliability issues for other teams. Whereas if he was actually just racing against these people, and there were, like, let's say we took out all the problems, we took out, you know, all of the external issues, if it was just solid racing, would Max win?
So people might argue and say, well, you know, devil's advocate, like the problems are part of F1, right? And Max is the world champion, so he deserves preferential treatment. However, what I feel like is people say that when it comes to like Max, but for some reason, when it comes to other drivers, nobody else gets the same like kind of leeway. And yes, I am talking about Lewis. Like Lewis was a 7-time world champion going up against Bottas, and you lot are saying, well, Bottas deserves to, like, well, why doesn't Perez? Perez has been in Formula One just as long as you know, he's been in Formula One just as long as Bottas, longer even. And literally, like, he was third in the championship. Now he's second in the championship. And he's literally like 7 points clear of Leclerc and a few points behind Max. So why does he not deserve an opportunity to go for that championship? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they are, and what annoyed me actually, well, what annoyed me was the team orders, but the pit stop afterwards, the pit stop after the team orders, that was a blatant, like, what the hell was that? Red Bull are known for their like sub 2-second pit stops, their 2-second pit stops. So you can't be telling me that he gets like a 5.7-second pit stop and it's just an accident. And even like Max had like a slightly long pit stop afterwards, and I genuinely feel like they gave him a slightly long pit stop just to be like, oh shit, we really fucked with Perez. Like, we got to at least try and make it look a little bit even. Like, because they gave him like a 3.4-second pit stop or something like that. I don't know. But all I'm saying is they need to, it's becoming so blatantly obvious the way that they favor Max, and they're willing to like literally sabotage their other drivers. I feel like a lot of people are just going to start getting really angry and upset, and I'm angry and upset. And if you agree with me, let's start a friggin' riot for Checo, because I'll be there.
What's funny is that Checo has just signed his contract extension as well.
I know, but the contract extension probably has the written in invisible ink, permanent number 2.
No.
Well, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's not get started on Red Bull because we know what we think of them. And
yeah. But it's interesting, actually, team orders as well, because another set of team orders were cropping up in the race, which was Lando Norris and Ricciardo. Lando Norris was like basically howling down the radio every 5 seconds for team orders, saying that, you know, can you switch us? Can you switch us? To the point where his mechanic said, look, if you can catch up to Ricciardo, so this is much later in the race. This is like, I want to say like lap 40 something. So there's about 10 laps left. And he said, well, if you can catch up to Ricciardo and Ricciardo can catch up to Alonso, we'll switch the two of you and you can pressure Alonso for 5 laps. And if you can't get it done within those 5 laps, then we'll switch you back at the end of the race so Ricciardo can have his space back. But in the end, he didn't even manage to catch Ricciardo. So I don't know. Lando Norris was making a lot of noise this race, a lot of noise.
I feel like Lando is losing favor with a lot of people, you know, recently.
Yeah.
I feel like something's happened and there's just like the Lando train is just going a bit downhill.
I don't know what it is, but I think it does have a little bit to do with his attitude, which is sad to say because, you know, whatever, we should be judging him on his driving, but I think it does have a little bit to do with his attitude.
Yeah, but you're right. Like, if you couldn't catch up to Ricciardo, then why was he barking those for those orders? It doesn't make sense, right? You only hear people coming on the radio saying "switch us" if the car behind is genuinely like, "I can overtake. I need you to let me do that." So yeah, I don't know.
In general, I felt like there wasn't a lot of overtaking in this race, and I think soon we're going to be able to have a conversation about how good these new cars are for like overtaking and general like racing craft, because today didn't show it to me, to be honest.
It's a street circuit, isn't it? And Baku's so narrow, like it is hard to overtake here. I feel like I could start talking about this now, so I won't. But definitely, because it has been interesting to see the new way of racing with the cars, I suppose. So yeah, that was McLaren cars. But then we also had some trouble at Mercedes.
We did. Just sadly. A little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. But yeah, Lewis, despite his incredible race finish,
had to struggle once again to get there.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, part of it has to be said is his own fault, because had he managed to qualify ahead of George, he would have had preferential strategy. So just, you know, being very honest about that, yesterday there wasn't any particular reason why he couldn't pull out a lap that was stronger than George's. I think they were running slightly different setups on the floor, from what I've read. However, you know, I don't know how much that really impeded him in comparison to George. So I genuinely just don't really know. In saying that, you know, today, Mercedes ended up kind of pulling a slightly wrong strategy call. I wouldn't necessarily say it was fully wrong, but I feel like they're not strong enough in their pit stops to double stack in the way that they were trying to. They aren't, like, I'm sorry, unless you can be doing like 2.3, 2.4 on both of them, like you can't gamble it in that way. At the same time, what other choice could they have made? If they left Lewis out, he would have then had to like go longer on the tires, and he would have been on a different strategy anyway, and there's no guarantee that he would have made it out back into the same place. So I think the strategy was correct, but I feel like their pit stops maybe were not strong enough to back up the strategy. And that's my opinion on that one. But it did put Lewis in a difficult position because he ended up coming out. I think it was behind, I want to say, who did he come out behind? Vettel?
Yeah, he came out behind Seb.
Yeah. And he just had to battle his way back to the front, which he did. But it was a battle again.
Yeah. And again, like we literally just said, Baku is not an easy circuit to overtake on. It's so narrow. So again, props to Lewis for managing to pull that out of the bag, because it's not easy. But also the porpoising issues that they had. And I don't know if you saw at the end with Hamilton struggling to get out of his car, but that was so horrible to see.
Yeah.
Like you could just see the struggle and the pain that like he was clearly in just by his body language.
Yeah. And obviously like the porpoising is going to affect different drivers differently, because people might be like, well, why, you know, Leclerc's got really bad porpoising, Sainz has, they're not like moaning about it or whatever. But I don't know, there does seem to be, to me, to be a massive safety issue to it.
I mean, there's been pictures going around on the internet of George with massive bruises on his arms because
no way.
Yeah, so it obviously is impacting their drivers. So it makes you question, like, how much are the teams doing? What are they doing? How quickly can they fix this? Because we've got back-to-back races. Like, this is the part of the season where it gets busy.
Yeah.
We've got Canada coming up in a week's time. What are they doing to ensure the safety and comfortability of their drivers? Because it's not an easy job. Like, we can sit here and judge as much as we want, but the G-force, like everything that these drivers feel, we can't even comprehend. So,
and I wonder if there is like a simple technical solution. People were saying about raising ride heights, active suspension, dampening. Like, what, I wonder what there could be done on a technical aspect that maybe they don't want to do because they're losing time. Then you're like, okay, well, does the FIA come in and say like everybody needs to do it? Then everybody loses the same amount of time, so you're technically still in like the same place as you would be without that thing. But I guess you don't know how it could affect different cars and stuff like that. I don't know. But let us know what you think. What should be done about the porpoising issue?
It might not even be an engineering thing because, total side note, guys, AlphaTauri fixed Tsunoda's rear wing today where he had a DRS issue with duct tape. So, it might not be something that complex. It could be very easy.
Could be.
But whatever. So, I guess that kind of concludes today's race. I mean, obviously, well done to Max for winning. That was really difficult to say. So difficult for me to say. But yeah, I mean, Red Bull brought home a 1-2 again. So congratulations. And then George on the podium again in P3, then Hamilton behind him. I think it was just a good top 10 in the end. But yeah, another race won by Max. So I suppose that just leaves us to do our winners and losers of the day.
Yeah.
Paris, you go first.
My loser of the day is going to be Carlos Sainz. I'm really sad to give it to him, to be honest. And I just think that he's just had really terrible luck at the beginning of this season. But at the same time, it is really shit for his whole like championship prospects and stuff. So I think, yeah, I'm just gonna have to give it to him today. What about you?
I mean, just on that, I think you're right. I think the championship is definitely like not in his grasp anymore. So that's sad. My loser of the day, I'm going to give it to Yuki Tsunoda, because what the hell was that whole situation with the rear wing, honestly?
But I mean, technically, that's like an AlphaTauri problem because he actually did a cute, like, a good overtakes and stuff. Like, there was one where he was like overtaking Ocon on the inside.
Yeah, he was doing well, but
I feel like that's an AlphaTauri problem, not a Yuki problem.
Fine. My loser of the day is AlphaTauri, except not because I love Gasly. So
this is them applying the tape. What was that?
It was weird. I was like, how are they allowed to get away with this?
But literally, and then there was like he got black flags to come in and stuff, and all they did was just duct tape it. I was sure that should have been a safety issue, but I guess they use duct tape for other things, securing the F1 car down. So I guess why can't they use it on? Because they do, like, they actually duct tape was originally invented for like rockets and shit. So it's supposed to be able to hold stuff down. I know, it's weird.
Oh, really? Thanks for explaining tape to me, Paris.
yeah, that thing that's sticky and you use it to secure stuff.
That was funny. Thanks. Right, winner of the day. Oh, definitely Seb. He's my driver of the day, I think, just because Aston have not had a good start to the year. They've struggled, but for him to bring home 6th is really good. 8 points for the team. I think he smashed it, and to recover from that little blip into the side as well, like, I'm proud of him. So my winner goes to Seb.
My winner is going to go to not to Max because he got handed that shit, not to Checo because he got that shit taken away from him, not to George because Georgie boy, I love you, but you didn't really have to do too much. Like, that was pretty chill race for you, which applauds for that anyway, because hey, you've got to be in there to win there. But yeah, so mine is going to go to Lewis, because he had to he had to work really hard for it, and especially with the porpoising issues, his back and stuff, like, he looked pretty beat at the end of it, and he worked hard and he managed to get fourth in a Mercedes when we probably were expecting like 7th or 8th, considering where he was at one point. And if the Ferraris had still been in there, I think he deserved it.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
But yeah, that is the end of our Azerbaijani Grand Prix race review, and we will be back next week with the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, and that is coming up literally next week. So see you again very, very soon.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.